talk about a few reasons why people choose Realty Trust Services and why we're actually in a position to provide you some of the best property management service. So, number one would be the fact that we have a focus, a real continued long-term focus on reducing your cost of vacancy. And why is that? Vacancy is the number one landlord cost. And it's complex. There's a lot going on during vacancy. You're having different parties happen and different parties involved with your property. And it's all compressed, hopefully, into a short period of time. And so there's complexity, there's just a lot that can go wrong and make it more expensive. Okay? And yet it's very high stakes. And so we look at it and say, well, what's the biggest problem? It's the 80-20 rule, right? If we can spend most of our energy on actually moving the needle and making your property more profitable, that's part of our job as a manager. And so that's why we made it a focus. And we haven't necessarily seen that in a lot of our competitors. So we want to talk about that a little bit. What do we do what are a few of the things that we do to help you with vacancy? Now, I'm not going to talk about everything, because what you find is that as a system, everything that you do feeds into everything else. You know, like it's one big flow as you're managing from, vacancy through the tenant life cycle, the tenant leaving, yearly statements and the accounting during that, and then it all flowing back in. Everything that we do affects everything else we do. So I can't just say it's these 9 things, but I'm going to give you some of the biggest things that we do to change vacancy. So, one of the first things that we really did was focusing on renewals. Okay, so and there's a few things we did just to do that, but we changed our contract. So it used to be that on the contract, the tenant had to give 30 days notice to leave at the end of their contract. We changed that to 60 days notice. And that might seem like a lot, but it really made a difference for the owners, because before, tenants would actually give us notice to leave. They had already oftentimes found another place to live and signed a lease. At 60 days notice, that's a little harder. And because of that, it gave us an opportunity to have a conversation with tenants to see if there's a way that we could retain them. And so it helped us establish a little bit longer period to help plan and be a part of the planning process, and hopefully retain a tenant and keep them in a property longer. Okay. So that was one big change. We really worked on establishing renewals as a process. And so at 120 days, you're being contacted. Hey, this is what we're planning on doing. And you have an opportunity to give some input to the process. And then at the remainder of the period until the 60 days, we're looking at working with the tenants to retain them, and exactly how we do that based on our conversations with you, if you have input. And then that 60 days now also gives us an opportunity, if they choose not to renew, to actually market the property. So that brings us to the second item here is that we do a really good job of pre-renting properties. So 60 to 70% of units are pre-rented, and because of that, what we mean by that is we've actually found a tenant before the property becomes vacant. That gives us a few more opportunities to save you money. So number one, if the property becomes vacant and we don't have a tenant, we're suddenly faced with having to make some decisions that have potential, like either way you choose, there's a potential downside. So you can do the minimum on a vacant property, but in one sense, you're trying to prepare for an unknown person. And so if you do the minimum, it could extend market time because you don't know what they're going to like. But you could default to doing the most, which could be a good investment decision in the long term, but in the short term, it's, just painting a house fully, carpeting it fully, or doing all new floor covering is an easy $10,000 on certain houses or more, And so you look at that and you're like, whoa, that's kind of ate up your profit for a while. And if you could do less, that'd be great. But then, well, you could lose anything you gained by doing less on market time because it's not appealing to that random person, which you don't know yet. You haven't met the person that's going to rent the house. It might take a little longer to find. And then you might have to reduce the rent, right? And so you look at all those and you're like, man, either one of these decisions seems the best. If it's pre-rented, all of that goes away, right? Now, what we have started doing, in terms of that, what we found is it was hard to make that right decision and advise owners on that. We had a hard time, really coming up with a lot of certainty in terms of you should do this, which is what we intend to do, what we think we should do as advisors and people out there, getting the job done for you. So what we found was it's actually much easier when coming into any make-ready. We developed what we call a step renovation process. So the old way of doing things, oftentimes it would involve a recommendation and an estimate. The problem is that getting the person to estimate correctly out there in the field, getting it back to the owner, excuse me, doing that all within a really tight timeline, and oftentimes properties become vacant all at once. So having a system where you could have a bank of 10 people that could do this for a relatively small portfolio, but a relatively large number of properties all becoming vacant at the same day, at the beginning of the month. You could have 10, and each one of these estimates oftentimes would take, by the time you did the inspection and went through and estimated, 5-6 hours, right? And so the ability to create consistent results was just not there in the way that we demanded. And so what we found was we did this step renovation where there's certain things you have to do every single time. You can literally schedule it up front, and there's a pretty decent, in terms of this certain numbers of these things. Like if you have to trash a house out, it's pretty straightforward. It's either trashed out or not. There's not a lot of subjective judgment about how good the trash out was, right? It's either trashed out or not. So, and there's really not any option. It has to be done. You cannot move forward without it. Also, the other issue was that with cleanings and trash outs, we found it was very hard to judge what needed to be done until it was even there. So trying to do an estimate, you ended up actually just estimating the most that might need to be done. That was the way that you protected yourself and the company. Well, when we were able to just go do it, so the trash out, the cleaning gets done immediately. It, number one, allowed us to quickly start showing the house, even if there was more work to be done. It allowed us to see whether we needed to paint a wall or just or just touch it up, or sometimes just clean up and it didn't need anything, right? And so suddenly what we found was just by having, the specific things that you would always have to do no matter what and getting it done and just doing it, time and materials, what we found out was that it shortened the process so quickly. There was no going back and forth on, like an overpriced estimate. Then it would sit there. Then we would have to schedule this big renovation. Then it would sit there longer while we were scheduling it. Then, because it's a larger renovation, there's more things that can go wrong, and there's plenty to go wrong when it comes to the field in the Cleveland, Ohio area. If anyone has dealt with contractors and people in the field, it is the largest complaint that they have. And so literally we have these all these potential issues, and we just eliminated like a whole bunch of them, and cost. So we found that by kind of doing it this way, we're able to cut down total cost by like 70% on average. And so, and then what we found also is that when you combine that with the fact that we're pre-renting most of these houses, we even had further opportunity. Sometimes there's this idea of like you're actually doing it for the person that's already moving in. So they don't really care about certain things. They've already decided they want the property, so you're not like hypothetically, you're not renovating for a hypothetical person, right? Now, in regards to the variation of how we do this, there is a certain standard that we have, which I have help articles and videos on, and you can look that up. So regardless of who is moving in and whether we've pre-rented, there's still certain standards. It has to be up to a livable quality that we consider livable in order for us to continue working on it. If we're going to do it, it's got to be done right. So the renovation is a big deal. The fact that it's pre-rented. While a tenant's in a property, the number one reason why they don't renew, by far, I think it's something like 70% or 80% of people that don't renew say their number one reason is the property was not maintained, not on a timely basis, not up to standard. And so we do put an emphasis on continually improving maintenance. Maintenance has a number of potential issues and problems that come with it. And we're always looking to do it better. And so with everything that we've done, the average stay at our properties is just under 3 years, okay? So we do really put a focus on maintenance. We're not perfect, and we never will be, but we're always looking to get better in every facet of that. So part of what we do to also further increase the tenant experience so they want to stay longer is that we provide a tenant benefits package. Now a lot of the things that it offers are things that just the tenants kind of have to do anyways, and so we assist a little bit. But a lot of times there's not high tenant compliance. For example, furnace filters. Tenants are supposed to replace those because those are consumables that just like a light bulb that goes bad. The tenant's responsible for replacing that, right? Because they were using it. Same with the filter. You're heating your house, you're responsible for the change in the filters, but it never happens, and yet it costs large amounts in maintenance not to do for the owner. And so rather than fighting with tenants afterwards about potential damage that they did by not replacing it, we help them with that, right? So there's a number of things that we kind of give in terms of tenant benefits, including credit building, just a ton of perks. We even give perks for paying rent on time instead of just, only if you pay late you have a fee. You're getting a little bit of a carrot as well. Tenant insurance, that's always been required. It's sometimes hard to manage because you don't always get noticed by tenant insurance. You should, but tenant insurance companies, if they have their own insurance and they cancel. So a number of little things that we add, and we try to make that as a way to make the experience with us a little more seamless, a little more unique. Hopefully they stay longer because of that. So that's another thing that we do. Another is a security deposit program. Security deposit program for some tenants is a game changer because it allows us to fill the property quicker because it's a security deposit waiver program. So it allows them to move in with less. On the other side, for the owner, it decreases the total amount of damage because so often tenants, when they have a deposit, they think to themselves when there's a little bit of damage, oh, my deposit will carry for that. It turns out they always underestimate how expensive it is to do repairs at a property. When they realize I don't have the money for this, they're much more careful about making sure that the damage doesn't happen in the first place. On the other hand, with the program, the owners are still protected for the full amount of the deposit. And so it's a really great program all the way around because it answers a number of issues, including friction on the final friction and potential liability when tenants move out and they're fighting over a deposit. It reduces a lot of the potential legal issues and ramifications against owners when we hold deposits. So a number of benefits, but one of them for that program is that it actually extends the likelihood of tenants staying longer because there is no deposit for them to use to move to the next property. And so for them, they're getting this benefit they might not get anywhere else, and it tends to increase the length that they're there. We have another thing that actually, on its face value, it might not seem like, well, is this really going to decrease vacancy? And we believe yes. So we actually have a home buyer program. And you're saying, well, you're going to sell a property to our tenants? And we don't push it hard. We're not forcing tenants to buy or anything like that. But we offer it as kind of a carrot at the beginning to make it easier to find, to show how we're different. We're not just trying to keep you trapped renting for the rest of your life. But if you choose to, we're going to help you with your credit and also give you an incentive if you buy. And so that it makes them kind of a member of a club in one sense. I've always looked at it this way, and this is true with like when we're hiring people for the property management company. I have this saying, I'd rather grab onto the tail of a comet than sink with a sinking ship, okay? And so people are vehicles. In their relationship with you, they're gonna bring you different places. And I'd rather have a shorter period of time with someone who's moving through my life but very successful and going up versus a longer period of time with someone that is sinking, okay? And you just remember, a homeownership mentality is going to dramatically change how your house is taken care of. If a tenant is thinking to themselves, I'd like to buy a house someday, trust me, it's not going to happen within 2 or 3 years anyways. So it's not going to significantly change the total tenancy in your house. However, what it will do is dramatically change the total cost of vacancy. Because if someone's buying a house, are they going to leave you high and dry when they know that if they cause cost to you, it's going to be attached to their house. It's going to affect their credit. We as a company will not give their future mortgage, a positive review. We will report a negatively to their credit, right? All these things happen. They care. And not only that, if they're working with us, we actually help them do a buyout and seamlessly add another tenant. Okay? So, like, all the potential ways you get lost are dramatically, on vacancy, are dramatically reduced by that program. And so basically it's a way of converting mentality and reducing loss and actually keeping people longer, not shorter, okay? Because the truth is, a good amount of tenants will never become buyers. But even if they don't, change the mentality slightly to think over time differently is a big deal. Another thing that we do to help kind of keep retention longer is we've made it easier for you to have pets. So we have a pet program where we actually will cover loss as part of our service to you of up to $2,000 to $5,000 depending on the program that you choose of pet damage over and above any deposit deductions. Okay, and so what this does is it allows you to safely allow them pets. And so when you're talking about reducing total cost of vacancy, you significantly increase your total opportunity to rent when you allow pets. Okay. Also, pet owners stay, and I don't have the numbers on the tip of my tongue, but something like 50 to 75% longer as tenants, because they don't know if they're going to be able to have that in the next property. They don't know that, right? There's a number of other reasons to allow pets. A lot of it being that it's hard to stop them from having it. So it's better to allow it and use that as a way to have more versus, going on the back end and having to do compliance and slam down and possibly chase a tenant off that's already there. So the pet program alone adds significantly to the total, reduction of vacancy costs. So these are just a few of the ways that we help you reduce your vacancy cost. I'd love to hear your feedback on that or answer any questions.